is People's Court, with Judge Vincent Malloy, and our case today is between plaintiff Edgar Allan Poe and defendant Tim Burton. Mr. Poe is suing Mr. Burton for plagiarizing his well-known poem The Raven in the recently released movie The Dolphin. Mr. Burton claims that the two stories are not the same, and he had no idea that The Raven even existed.
The court will come to order. The Honorable Judge Malloy presiding.
Is the plaintiff ready to present?
Yes, Your Honor. 161 years ago, minding my own business, I wrote the terribly spooky poem called The Raven. This was one of my many poems which brought me great recognition. 3 months ago was about the time when I found out that my story had been stolen. Stolen by Mr. Tim Burton in his new movie, The Dolphin.
Does the defense have an opening statement?
I most certainly do, Your Honor. First of all, the stories are completely different. In mine, a mysterious dolphin causes havoc in a troubled man's backyard. And in the other story, there is a raven who haunts a gentleman in his own house.
Is this true, Mr. Poe?
Yes, it is, but I've written stories for many years, and I can tell when there's a copy.
Mr. Poe, in what year did you write The Raven?
It was the year 1845, Your Honor.
What style of writing would you say The Raven is?
Well, there are two specific styles that I write in, a grotesque style and an arabesque style. The grotesque style is when there's physical suffering and pain, and the arabesque style is when there's games played with the mind. I wrote The Raven in the arabesque style.
What style would you say Tim Burton's The Dolphin is in?
Well, I think it's obvious that it's in the arabesque, exactly the same as my Raven.
Now, is the style more romantic or neoclassical?
I definitely feel that the style is completely romantic, because the whole story deals with the main character's personal feelings and imagination.
Now, Mr. Poe, is it true that you were into lots of drugs and alcohol in your early years?
Yes, it is true, but I've stopped all that now. I'm totally clean.
Bailiff, the results from our routine drug and alcohol test, please. Let's see. You seem to be completely clean according to the results.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Poe, will you please read the beginning of your poem, The Raven?
Yes, I will gladly do that, Your Honor. Once upon a midnight dreary, well I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more.
Good. Now, what happens in the rest of that story?
Well, the main character keeps hearing this tapping sound and thinks it's at the window. So he opens his window and a raven flies in and perches above his chamber door. The bird tortures the man repeatedly, saying that he will never see his long-lost Lenore.
After hearing that beginning passage, I am assuming that there are many literary terms being used in your poem.
Yes, there are, Your Honor. In fact, the first two lines when I say, "Once upon a midnight dreary, and well I pondered weak and weary," dreary and weary are example of end rhyme. And then in the line where I say, this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, beguiling and smiling are an example of internal rhyme. Finally, in the line where I say, "On this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore," home, horror, and haunted are an example of alliteration.
Wow. And why is it that you wrote about death all the time?
Well, every woman that I've come in contact in my life pretty much has died. My mother, my stepmother, and my poor Virginia.
Oh no!
That sucks. Thank you, Mr. Poe. Now, Mr. Burton, I understand you brought along a clip of your movie to show us.
Yes, Your Honor, let's take a look at that right now.
Okay.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a splashing, as of someone gently splashing at my chamber door.
"'Tis some swimmer splashing at my chamber door." Only this, and nothing more.
Ah, this.
Very interesting, Mr. Burton. Can you briefly explain the rest of your movie?
Well, the splashing on his door happens to be the dolphin, whom is in the swimming pool. The dolphin terrorizes the man by telling him that he will never see his deceased wife again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burton. I think I've heard enough. Even though the stories are not exactly the same, there has been enough convincing evidence shown to see some form of plagiarism. In the case Poe versus Burton, I have found the defendant guilty of plagiarism in the 2nd degree. You are penalized to death by pain of tuberculosis. The court is now adjourned.
I'll get you, Edgar Allan Poe!
Good day,
if it's
sir.
the last thing I do!
This is the execution of Tim Burton by lethal injection of the tuberculosis virus. There were no animals or humans hurt during the production of this video. And when Sean coughed, that wasn't blood, that was ketchup.